even if their lesson isn't so, even if there's someone who doesn't have a lot of experience in the field, you can tell if they show up prepared or not. Right. If they show up, if they ask the kids what their names are, like little things like that it's hard to teach people if they're not all that naturally drawn to it. Right. Yes. I found a lot of interviews, if we have multiple people in the interview, sometimes the candidates just speak to the person who's the hiring person. I've noticed that a lot, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just things you can pick up about character. And when you're back and forth communicating with them, setting up interviews, so many people, they don't respond. They respond late. Right. If you ask them, can you send me these 3 things? And they only send 2. These are all clues along the way that this is how this person shows up. Right. So I'm perfectly fine hiring people whose end goal isn't youth development, right? If we're hiring some of our part-time, not, we shouldn't have so many part-time positions. If it's someone who's already knows they're going to be in another field, but they want to stick around for, a summer camp or 2, that's great. But really focusing on, we want good people who we can help support and become good youth development professionals.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Those are good recommendations. Mm-hmm. So, you've given us a lot of really good tips. I'm wondering if you're holding on to any more resources. If people, you mentioned Harvard Business Review earlier. That's one that I've looked at before too. But if you think that if people want to learn more about like hiring, developing staff, whether it's in person or it's virtually, what other resources do you recommend?
So this is like all things now in 2020. We keep talking about virtual. So part of the joy of having everything virtual is there's so much out there and it can be really overwhelming, right? So if you jump on and you look for leadership resources or leadership support, you'll never get to the end of the Google pages, right? There's just constant.
Right.
And so it's nice in a sense of like, wow, look at how much support is out there, but it can be overwhelming too. And so the way that I recommend about leadership and hiring support is always start local, right? What's closest to you. So you may or may not be in a place where you have an organization like OAN or even a more local, right? Not just statewide, but somewhere in your community. I know I tend to live in cities, so cities tend to have a lot of resources available, but we always have some sort of central professional development leg organization. And so to start locally and see what sort of resources are in your community first and foremost, because that gives you the option to do things in person, to not always be virtual. And so start with your local community, whether it's youth development specific or not. It might not be, but you might have Chamber of Commerce, young leader networks, there's meetups, there's things through local libraries, and there's so much. And so locally, it's hard to recommend specifics, but to say that, start there. Start locally and see what's there. If you're fortunate enough to have a youth development after school group, certainly go there. Or what does your state organization provide? Every state has their own chapter for youth development. What is that able to provide for you? And then outside of youth development specific, there are lots of free, I always try to advocate free readings and blogs and websites. It's hard to find free trainings for leadership development, but one of my go-tos always is Gallup, because Gallup is international. It crosses fields, but it's very, very focused on leadership, and it does in-depth really powerful research, and it presents it in a way that's really easy to understand. So they have all kinds of books and articles and newsletters and whatever. And then there's resources if you want to drill down a little bit to the type of leader that you are. So one of the books that influenced my life so strongly was a book called Quiet by Susan Cain. And she is like the introverted leader guru. And she talks a lot about what it means to be an introverted leader in this world. And I just love that book. And then you have your big players. You have people like Simon Sinek, who talks about, starting with why. And you have the big people, but it doesn't have to be big people either, right? Like I go through phases in my reading. I always recommend the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott. It's newer, and it talks a lot about direct communication and leading from a place of authenticity. So I love that book. But then during this quarantine period, I finally got around to the Success Principles by Jack Canfield, which has been around for ages, right? And a couple years ago, I finally got to How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That's, I think, literally 100 years old, right?
Right.
So a lot of things are classics for a reason, but I think when part of the journey is not like, here's the one thing that's going to do it for you. It's like, oh, why don't I take some time to explore these different things? And in addition to books, there's just blogs and podcasts and all kinds of resources. So that's sort of a roundabout answer, but I think it's indicative of what it looks like, right? So there's just a lot out there to explore, and I encourage the exploration because then you start to see things you gravitate to or not. And the other pitch that I feel obligated to say as a leadership coach myself is, believe it or not, the after school field is starting to get on board with external support. And that's part of my big push, is not just for the executives, although they need it, but to provide coaching and mentoring for staff at all levels. That's really a huge support. So if you're in a position where you can afford it, or you have a great organization who supports you, to get a leadership coach or consultant, mentor, whatever version that shows up at, that can be really powerful.
Wow. Yeah. That would be great. Katherine, it has been great having you on the podcast today. And, I've appreciated all of your thoughtfulness and all of your insight. And if folks who are listening right now want to get a hold of you and maybe have you present for their organization or for their upcoming event, either IRL or virtually, how do they get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me in whatever form works for them. So my website is katherinespinney.com, and there's lots of information on the website. And it's a good place to start because I have a weekly blog that I'm posting one today, and I think I'm up to like 125 blog posts or something. So you can start to get a feel for my values and my philosophy and my approach, and whether it might be a good fit for you or not. Also, I have a resource page. Most of the resources are free, and then there's a couple of paid ones on there, but that might be able to help you out. And as far as social media goes, I have the same handle across my social media, which is Coach Kat. The Kat is with a K, 2017, and I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you go to Facebook, you'll see a lot of the Facebook Lives that I did during this time period. I was not active with live streaming before this all happened, but like all of you, I've been learning and taking this time to understand better how to use the virtual space to support folks who need it. So there's a bunch of my videos on there that you can start to get a sense of my presentation style. And I'm on LinkedIn too. You can email me. So there's all sorts of ways you can get in touch with me. But I think what is important when you're seeking out support for yourself as a leader, when you're seeking out support for your team, is one, you do a little bit of homework so that you can find what's a good fit for you. So I'm always happy to see if I'm that good fit. And if I'm not, I have loads of referrals and resources as well, because there's lots of great people out there, and sometimes it's just a matter of match and what works well for you. So very happy to connect with who's ever interested.
That's awesome. Thank you for that offer. On behalf of everyone listening, thank you so much. And thank you again for your time this morning, for coming on the podcast and sharing all of this valuable insight. I really appreciate you. Thanks so much.
And thank you, Nichelle. And I want to say to you and also to your listeners, but I do this one session called Professional Development for the Youth Development Professional. And it's specifically about ways for you to grow and resources and websites. And even though we're not at the degree point yet, we do have a lot of certificates out there. So it's a really great session. It's one of my favorite sessions to do. But I also try to include books and blogs and websites, and just to show people the different ways. But when I looked for youth development specific podcasts, there are some, but they're very, very few. And so I'm so grateful to you to use this platform, because I'm not sure if you have metrics yet, how much you're getting outside of Ohio too. But certainly to cross over to your state, and who knows, right, how far your reach is going. But it's such a wonderful way to spread the message and the good work you're doing, and it's not happening very much now. So, Nichelle, you are a true visionary in that sense, and many others.
I appreciate that kindness. Thank
you for doing this.
You're very welcome, and thank you. Have a great day. I'm going to wrap this up here. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning into our podcast. I want to thank Katherine Spinney today for being on the show and sharing information about hiring and developing high-quality staff. The Ohio Afterschool Network podcast was written and directed by Nichelle Shaskis. It was recorded at the OAN office located in Willis Education Center in lovely downtown Delaware, Ohio. This podcast was edited and produced by Chris Kilbarger. Music also by Chris Kilbarger. OAN would like to thank the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation and the National Afterschool Association for their national support of the statewide work that OAN does here in Ohio. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Ohio Afterschool, or subscribe to our newsletter at oanohio.org. That's it for today. Catch you next time.